Whoa. Did you know that it's been 25 years since George the Jungle came out this year in 1997? I know I can't believe it's been an enjoyably fun movie that I liked. Yeah, to the likes of what I saw in Brendan Fraser's filmography, he's probably one of my favorite actors to be involved with. Although it was directed by Sam Weisman, the plot is very simple. When a primitive man named George is raised by animals in the jungles of Africa, Ursula discovers her treacherous former fiancé. That I noticed that Lyle D. Van Groot, who was portrayed by Thomas Hayden Church, who would later go on to portray the Sandman in Spider-Man 3, would be involved in his debut movie. Although Brendan Fraser would later go on to be involved in Stephen Sommers' The Mummy, Word of God mentions that I noticed that there's something that felt off. Well, for this movie, the plot involved around what it all began in Uganda when tour guide Kwame and his porters hired a heiress named Ursula Stanhope, who are tracking down this so-called guy named George. But Max and Four, who are working with Lyle D. Van Groot, have learned that Kwame is telling the story of a so-called white ape. According to Word of God, the so-called white ape is a superhuman primate that dominates the jungle in what everyone fears for him. The next day, Lyle, who wants to take interest in trying to take down the white ape, had a near-death experience by being attacked by a lion. But he accidentally knocked himself out while trying to save Ursula, only to realize the king of the jungle, George, is the white ape himself. Wow. Does this mean they're trying to pull off a Planet of the Apes-esque deja vu? For some reason, for his ivory, the only thing he could do is that George decides to leave the jungles behind to get to San Francisco to rescue her. However, they notice that Lyle has kidnapped Ape and is taking him to Las Vegas for no good reason. However, it suddenly becomes a cult when Lyle forms a cult to get George killed, as this puts both of them in danger. The only way to do this is that when George escapes the mercenaries and performs a big swing to rescue Ursula from Lyle's grip, but when he crashes into a massive tree, this causes the tree to fall over a river, allow him to rescue Ursula to safety. But Lyle gets knocked by the tree into the cave. He's believing that he's trying to share the boat with Ursula, but claims them wedded. He lights the lighter as he beholds he's just married himself to a gorilla. By accident, after Lyle almost got arrested to custody, George realizes they declared their love for each other and marry. As they realize she moves into George's treehouse, they realize that George Jr. is born at Top Pride Rock. As Ape moves to Las Vegas, as well as becoming a famous stage performer, with Max and Four's props, they realize all the animals except for Ape witness George raising his son George Jr. up atop Pride Rock within the mountain itself, which is also a reference to the ending of The Lion King and also the beginning of The Lion King itself. They had some sort of a bookends-like situation where The Lion King and George the Jungle were the same movie. It's how both of the main characters, Simba and George, were to succeed their fathers, what I can imagine. But Ursula's parental husband, Lyle, tries to kill George, but it was no good. Even though Scar sees the throne, Simba gets manipulated, believing he was exiled, and he realizes he's growing up in philosophy with Timon and Pumbaa, receiving that he needs perspective from Nala to prove that the chimpanzee shaman Rafiki needs to put an end to Scar's tyranny. And for this movie, it does the same thing to what I've learnt from. What I've learned my lesson in this movie, it's quite awesome. Despite a budget of $55 million and it grossed up to $174.4 million, I've probably learned my lesson in Barnyard as well, where a Holstein cow named Otis learns the value of responsibility in order to avenge his father's death from a coyote attack. But in the end, when Otis finds an imaginative way to make himself learn about his funny quick thinking, he finally gets the hold of letting his wife give birth to Ben Jr. However, as Otis heads to the barnyard, he sees the spirit of Ben among the stars. All I can say is this ending is probably the best. But what I've learned about its bad qualities, considering that I've learned something very interesting, I noticed that both George of the Jungle and Inspector Gadget were originally going to be produced by Steven Spielberg. For some reason, Universal had the license of acquiring the opportunity of producing the movies. Eventually, it was Disney's idea to do this. What I'm guessing is that Brendan Fraser was offered the role of Inspector Gadget, while Thomas Hayden Church was also offered the role of Dr. Claw. In reality, we end up getting Matthew Broderick, who was originally considered for the role of George from George of the Jungle, would become Inspector Gadget, and for Rupert Everett, who was originally supposed to become Lyle D. Van Groot, would become Dr. Claw. That sounds like a funny connection for these two movies. For some reason, despite the decent special effects and the hilarious use of comedy, I'd personally give this movie like a 7.1 out of 10. But despite its bad qualities of how I've learnt about Thomas Hayden Church moving on to Spider-Man 3, which was a movie that came out 10 years later, also had a George of the Jungle reference to it. It sounded very funny, but you know what they said about the lesson? You know, when you're going to Africa, like in the jungles of Uganda, there's always the wild that believes in you. And you know that all the animals have lives too, because these animals like to come out and play. Just like toys were like playthings that come to life. You know what they say? These animals see everything like the toys see everything. And that's how my message was learnt from. So if you hit the like button, you could subscribe it for now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.